Hello and welcome to my channel, iWindalu's Gaming. Nahida has arrived and with it comes the desire for more knowledge. In today's video, I'll be going over my weapon recommendations for Nahida, including both some in-game showcases and a lot of theory crafting. So the Dendro Archon is an interesting and unique character. She has a lot of really interesting weapon choices, and honestly it can feel overwhelming to figure out what weapon is right for you. I'll be showcasing 6 different weapons in the game, and then after that, we'll see how well it aligned with some of my theory crafting. But before that, it's time to pay some bills, and today's sponsor is King God Castle. King God Castle is a free-to-play auto-battle defense game with gorgeous pixel art. Immerse yourself in tactical auto-battling gameplay in King God Castle, where you'll merge tons of heroes and purchase labyrinth-like buffs as you play the game. Fight hordes of enemies, hulking beasts, and even other heroes. King God Castle is easy to pick up and still an incredibly deep game with many advanced mechanics to master. And the pixel art isn't the only art that looks great in King God Castle, but the character art is incredible as well. Collect over 30 different husbandos and waifus, all with their own unique style and abilities. Some of these heroes include this dragon guy that breathes fire to wipe out hordes of enemies, this paladin that smashes enemies with a powerful mace, and this elven archer that strafes to mow down all her enemies. October 2022 marks the 2-year anniversary for King God Castle, and everyone who logs into the game before November 11th will get a new hero scroll. So what are you waiting for? Smash that link down below to get started with King God Castle today. Huge thanks to King God Castle for sponsoring today's video. Now Nahida is a character with a lot of different states, and each of those states affect weapon performances and stat optimization. For the following in-game showcases, we're making the following assumptions. Nahida will be using the same Gilded Dreams artifacts throughout. I'm aware of the lack of weapon-specific optimizations due to this, but I'm still happy with the testing results. Nahida will mainly be used as an on-field spread damage dealer. Nahida has a teammate with 1000 Elemental Mastery. This way her Elemental Burst will provide herself with 250 Elemental Mastery as a buff. Nahida has 1 Pyro and 1 Electro teammate, and we are focusing on Tri-Karma Purification damage and not other sources of Nahida's damage. Kuki has the Deepwood Memories and is there to apply Quicken, and finally Zhongli is here so we can focus on doing damage and recording it instead of just dodging all the time. There are way more scenarios and situations for Nahida to keep in mind, but this is a good starting point for understanding Nahida's weapon options. Our first showcase will be with the 1000 Floating Dreams at Refinement 1. This weapon provides a massive 265 Elemental Mastery and 30% bonus damage thanks to its passive. We'll be observing the crits that these weapons do and then comparing their average damage output, which factors in crit rate as well, into our chart. We can see that the 1000 Floating Dreams at Refinement 1 did 53,295 damage on crit. After calculating the average, we are now at 39,762 damage. This will be our baseline moving forward, and I'm going to give it a 4 slime out of 5 slime rating. What's particularly nice about this weapon is that it is essentially unconditional, and it even provides a small 40 Elemental Mastery buff to Nahida's teammates. Let's take a look at the second weapon, a Refinement 5 Sacrificial Fragments. With the Sacrificial Fragments, the Tri-Karma Purification managed to crit for 45,936 damage, which is actually only 14-ish% less than her signature weapon. This is typically a much smaller gap than most characters have with their signature weapons. Overall, not too shabby, and based on this in-game performance, I'm giving this a 3 slime out of 5 slime rating. Now do keep in mind that the Sacrificial Fragment doesn't actually help Nahida get more energy. Up next we have the Skyward Atlas. The Skyward Atlas is a predominantly attack % scaling catalyst, but with a little bit of bonus elemental damage in its passive. Nahida is a very elemental mastery focused character, and even at Refinement 5, it's effectively doing the same amount of damage as the Sacrificial Fragments is. Since most of you probably don't have this thing at Refinement 5, and honestly even at Refinement 5, I'm giving this weapon an unfortunate 2 out of 5 slime rating. We can see that even a 5-star weapon at Refinement 5 is doing essentially the exact same damage as the 4-star weapon, the Sacrificial Fragments. Next, let's take a look at the craftable Mappa Mare at Refinement 5. This thing's buff can only be triggered while on field. Fortunately, Nahida is able to get 2 stacks very quickly with all the spreads that she activates. After obtaining 2 stacks, her Tri-Karma crits are hitting for a reasonable 49,179 damage. This is smack dab in the middle of her signature weapon and the Sacrificial Fragments. Not bad for the first craftable catalyst in the game. A solid 3 slime rating. And oh boy, the biggest pain in the butt weapon to showcase properly is up next, which is the Widsith. Mine is at Refinement 5. Her 1-note attack buff, Tri-Karma, critted for 54,195 damage, which is interestingly still higher than even the Mappa Mare. The 2-note buff skyrocketed her Tri-Karma crits to 66,242, and the EM buff wasn't far behind at 62,639 damage. Clearly the ceiling for the Widsith's damage is very impressive, but unfortunately when the Widsith's buff is down, it performs worse than anything else on this chart so far, doing only 46,832 damage per crit. Still, for the explosive potential power and the fact that this thing is doing significantly more damage than even her signature weapon with the proper buffs, I'm giving it a 3.5 slime out of 5 slime rating. The last in-game showcase is the Kagra's Verity at Refinement 5. Now this fight actually allows us the time we need to ramp up to 3 stacks, which requires Nahida to use her elemental skill 3 times. At 3 stacks, she is now hitting for 69,739 damage per Tri-Karma tick. This is higher than even the Widsith's best buff, and I think it has significantly better uptime and controllability, because once you get it to 3 stacks, it's not difficult to keep it at 3 stacks. This thing gets a stellar 4.5 slime rating. So that ends our in-game showcases of the weapons that I actually have available for Nahida, but I'm sure you all have a lot more questions about a lot more weapons for Nahida. So don't worry guys, it's massive chart time. I compared the in-game test results to my Theorycrafted math, and, well, they aligned extremely well, only really having a 1 to 2% difference. Of course, my damage maximizing algorithm is better at shuffling around the stats and substats to make micro optimizations where, of course, if I didn't swap any artifacts, I'm not going to get. So now let's go through each of the weapons in order of most recommended to least recommended. Let's start with Nahida's signature weapon, 1,000 Floating Dreams. Now at Refinement 5, Nahida would be doing 19% more damage than a Refinement 1 1,000 Floating Dreams. Given the lack of ramp up time and significant additional damage, I'm going to give her signature weapon at Refinement 5 a 5 slime rating. It also gives 40 to 48 Elemental Mastery to the entire team depending on the refinements. Unfortunately at Refinement 1, I don't think it's necessarily worth the Primo Gems, as since we saw earlier the Widsith significantly outdamaged it at Refinement 5. But because it is unconditional for Nahida and has no downtime, it still gets a solid 4 slime out of 5 slime rating from me. Next is the Kagra's Verity, which is a great option for Nahida. Since her Tappy has a 5-second cooldown, in many situations you're able to bring it up to 3 stacks in just around 10 to 11 seconds and still be productive during a good chunk of setting up your team. Refinement 5 is the theoretical highest damage that Nahida's Tri-Karma Purification can do, but due to the ramp up time and it not enhancing her non-negligible normals and charge attack spreads, I'm going to give this a 4.5 slime out of 5 slime rating at Refinement 5 and a 4 slime rating at Refinement 1. The third most recommended weapon from me is the Widsith. It's always fun to see giant numbers, and the Widsith is the most accessible way for honestly any Catalyst user to really achieve this, and Nahida is no different. It also helps that 2 out of the 3 buffs are great for Nahida, being both the Elemental Damage and Elemental Mastery buffs. The attack buff unfortunately is the worst buff, but even the worst buff from the Widsith still outperforms most of Nahida's other weapon options. Since the Widsith is a common 4-star weapon on every single banner, a lot of even free-to-play players have this thing at Refinement 5. So due to the big potential damage it can output, it gets a solid 3.5 slime rating, and it's my third most recommended weapon overall for Nahida. Another great weapon is the Solar Pearl. If you use Nahida on field, you won't have any damage maintaining the Solar Pearl's buff. However, even at its best, it is very similar in performance to the attack buff on the Widsith. But honestly, you can't really go wrong with the Solar Pearl as long as you're able to maintain its uptime by using her normal attacks every once in a while. Over a long 20 to 30 second fight, if you can maintain the Solar Pearl's buff, the Solar Pearl's consistency will outperform the Widsith's more upfront damage, and it's less clunky overall in my opinion. Still, due to the lack of explosive upfront damage, I'm giving it a 3.5 slime out of 5 slime rating, same as the Widsith. The next most recommended weapon is probably the Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds. We all know the problems with this weapon by now, but unless you plan to keep Nahida on field for a very long time and not swap her off, it's not the best option, especially for a 5-star weapon. Nonetheless, it still gets a 3 slime out of 5 slime rating for its great crit rate substat as well as the occasional high elemental buff. Next is the Mappa Mare, which I did showcase earlier. A reasonable option with a refreshable buff that you can grab quickly when Nahida is on field. Again, you can't gain its stacks while off field. However, 93% at Refinement 5 of her signature weapon's damage for a craftable weapon is honestly a stellar performance for a craftable weapon. One of the best we've actually seen. A solid 3 slimes out of 5 slimes for this craftable weapon. Next up is the Wandering Even Star, whose damage is okay and it provides a team with a small attack buff. There really isn't much else to say about this weapon because it's actually quite simple. This is a decent option if you have it, another 3 slimes out of 5 slime rating. So the Sacrificial Fragments actually does have some utility with its refresh. Of course, you can do another E really quickly to get another Dendro application and another spread, but in particular, if you're able to first tag everything with Electro, you can get another quick camera mode E to hit everything with an additional spread. This does add additional AoE damage and situational utility, and that's why I'm giving it a 3 slime rating despite its lower damage than the weapons above. The last EM substat weapon worth considering is the Magic Guide. However, Nahida applies a ton of Dendro and therefore tons of quickens. This means that she actively removes Electro very aggressively. The Magic Guide has a pretty large damage range, ranging from 82% when the enemy doesn't have Electro on them to 91% when the enemy has Electro on them. So if you do really plan to focus on spread Nahida damage, I can only give it a 2.5 slime rating out of 5 slimes due to likely the high amounts of downtime this weapon will actually have. I do think though that this weapon is better for Nahida when she's completely off field, supporting an aggravate DPS character like Saina or Kaching, and in that situation, I think it deserves a 3 slime rating. And the lowest spot on this chart is the Refinement 5 Skyward Atlas. Every other attack percent focused catalyst will pretty much be right here or even lower than the Skyward Atlas. However, due to the egregious amount of attack as well as some bonus damage, the Skyward Atlas does deserve a 2 slime rating out of 5 slimes instead of, for example, a 1 slime rating. It's not like Nahida doesn't scale at all off of attack, it's just clearly the much worse option in comparison to Elemental Mastery. So there you go, my full chart ranked from my most recommended weapon to my least recommended weapon for a spread damage focused Nahida. Now these rankings definitely change a bit for more off-field Nahida playstyles, but at least as far as spread damage and some occasional field time is concerned, these are my personal recommendations. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them down in the comments below. Also, I regularly make Genshin Impact videos ranging from Caesar showcases, DPS showdowns, guide videos, and more. So be sure to smash the subscribe button as it's the best and easiest way for you to support my work. Also, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.